I don't know who wrote this story. I just know that I love it. It's a fantastic story, and I'm looking forward to trying getting through it without breaking down and crying myself. Okay, welcome back to Stepping Stones to Your Success. This is Garland. We're going to jump ahead into fundamental natural law number 47. Now, fundamental natural law number 47 is pretty cool because it ties in with the Christmas season. I don't know who wrote this story. I just know that I love it. It's a fantastic story, and I'm looking forward to trying getting through it without breaking down and crying myself. It's called Always Keep the Spirit of the Season. The way the story goes is the old man was sitting in his gas station on a cold Christmas Eve. He hadn't been anywhere in years since his wife passed away. It was just another day to him. He didn't hate Christmas, he just couldn't find a reason to celebrate. He was sitting there looking at the snow for the last hour, wondering what it's all about, when the door opened and a homeless man stepped through. Instead of throwing the man out, old George, as he's known by his customers, told the man to sit over by the heater and warm himself up.
"Thank you. I don't mean to intrude,"
The stranger said.
"I see you're busy and I'll just go."
"Not without something hot in your belly," George replied. He turned and opened the wide-mouthed thermos and handed it to the stranger. "It ain't much, but it's tasty. It's some of my best stew. I made it myself. There's some coffee over there, and it's fresh as well." Just at that moment, he heard a ding of the driveway bell. He says, "Excuse me, I'll be right back," George says. There in the driveway was an old 53 Chevy, and steam was rolling out of the front. The driver was in a panic. He said, "Mister, can you help me?" The driver said in a deep Spanish accent, "My wife is with child, and the car is broken." George opened the hood, and it was bad. It looked like the block had cracked from the cold, and the car was dead. "You ain't going anywhere in this thing," George said as he turned and walked away. "But mister, please help," as the door closed behind George as he went inside. He went to the office wall, got to the keys to his old truck, and went back outside. He walked around the building, opened the garage door, started his truck, and drove around where the couple was waiting. "Here, take my truck. Ain't the best thing you ever looked at, but she runs real good." George helped the woman into the truck and watched them speed off into the night. He turned and went back into the office. "Glad I gave him the truck. Those tires on that car was shot as well. Truck has new ones. It'll get them where they need to go." George thought he was talking to the stranger, but the stranger was gone. Thermos on the desk was empty. A used coffee cup was right by it. Well, at least he got something in his belly, George thought. George went outside to see if that old Chevy would start. It cranked slowly, but it did start, so he pulled it into the garage where the truck was. He thought he might as well tinker with it for something to do, because Christmas Eve means no customers. He discovered that the block hadn't cracked. It was just the bottom hose of the radiator. He thought to himself, well, I can fix this. So he put a new one on. Those tires ain't gonna get him through the winter either. So he took the snow treads off his wife's old Lincoln, because he wasn't gonna drive that car anyway. As he was working, he heard shots being fired. He ran outside, and beside the police car was an officer laying on the cold ground. He just got shot through the shoulder. He moaned up to George, says, "Can you please help me?" Well, George helped the officer inside, as he remembered his training in the Army as he was a medic. He knew the wound needed attention, pressure to stop the bleeding. He remembered the uniform company had left there that morning and left some clean shop towels. He used those and duct tape to bind the wound. He said, "Hey, duct tape can fix anything," trying to make the officer feel at ease. Something for the pain, George thought. All he had was the pills that he used for his back. These ought to work. Put some water in a cup and gave the pills to the policeman. "You hang in there," he says. "I'm going to go get you an ambulance." The phone was dead. "Maybe I can get one of your buddies out there on that talk box in your car." He went out there to find that a bullet had gone through the dashboard, destroying the two-way radio. He went back to the police officer, setting up. "Thanks," said the officer. "You could have left me behind. The guy that shot me is still out there." George sat down beside him and says, "I never left an injured man in the Army, and I ain't going to leave you either." George then pulled back the bandage to check the bleeding. "Looks worse than it really is. Bullet passed right through you. Missed all the important stuff. With time, you're going to be right as rain." George got up and poured him a cup of coffee. "How do you take it?" he asked. "None for me," said the police officer. "Oh, you're going to drink this. It's the best in the city. Too bad I ain't got donuts." The officer laughed and winced at the same time. Just then, the front door of the office flew open. In burst a young man with a gun. "Give me all your cash. Do it now," yelled the young man. His hand was shaking, and George could tell he had never done anything like this before. "That's the guy that shot me," exclaimed the officer. "Son, why are you doing this?" asked George. You need to put that cannon away. Somebody else might get hurt. The young man was confused. Shut up, old man. I'll shoot you too. Give me your cash. The cop was reaching for his gun. Put that away, said George. We got one too many in here right now. His attention turned to the young boy. Son, it's Christmas Eve. If you need money, well then here. It ain't much, but it's all I got. Now put that pea shooter away. George pulled out $150 out of his pocket, handed it to the boy, and reached for the gun at the same time. The boy released the gun and dropped to his knees and began to cry. I'm not very good at this, am I? All I wanted is to buy something for my wife and son. He went on and explained, I've lost my job, my rent is due, and they repossessed my car last week. George handed the gun to the cop. Son, we all get in a bit of a squeeze every now and then. We try our best and we make it through to the other side. He got the young man to his feet and set him down in a chair across from the cop. Sometimes we do stupid things, as George handed the young man a cup of coffee. Being stupid is one of the things that makes us human. Coming in here with a gun ain't the answer, son. Sit there, get warm, and we'll sort this out. Young man stopped crying. He looked over at the cop and he says, Sorry I shot you. It just went off. I'm real sorry, officer. Shut up and drink your coffee, said the cop. George could hear the sound of sirens outside. A police car and an ambulance come screeching to a halt. 2 cops came through the door, guns drawn. Chuck, you okay? Asked one of the cops of the wounded officer. Not bad for a guy that just took a bullet. How'd you find me? GPS locator. Best thing since sliced bread. Who did this? The other cop asked as he approached the young man. Chuck answered, I don't know. He just ran off into the dark, dropped his gun, and ran. George and the young man both looked puzzled. The wounded officer continued, That guy work here? George says, Yeah, just hired him this morning. Boy lost his job. Paramedics came in and loaded the officer up onto the stretcher. The young man leaned over to the wounded officer and said, Why? Chuck just said, Merry Christmas, boy. And you too, George. Thanks for everything. The young man began to cry again as he handed back the $150 to George. Now, what are you supposed to buy Christmas dinner with? You keep that too, George said. Now get on home to your family. The young man turned with tears streaming down his face. I'll be here in the morning for work if that job offer's still good. Nope, I'm closed on Christmas Day, George said. I'll see you the day after. George turned around to find that the stranger had returned. Where'd you come from? I thought you just left.
I've been here. I have always been here,
said the stranger.
You say you don't celebrate Christmas. Why?
Well, after my wife passed away, I don't see what all the bother was. Putting up a tree, it seems like a waste of a good pine tree. Baking cookies like I used to with Martha didn't seem the same when it was by myself. Plus, I was getting a little chubby. The stranger put his hand on George's shoulder.
But you do celebrate the holiday, George. You gave me food and drink and warmed me when I was cold and hungry. The woman with child will bear a son, and he will become a great doctor. The policeman you helped, he will save 19 people from being killed by a terrorist. The young man who tried to rob you will make you rich and not take anything for himself. That is the spirit of the season, George, and you keep it as good as any man.
Well, George was taken back by all the stranger had to say. And how do you know all this? Asked the old man.
Trust me, George, I got the inside track on this sort of thing. And when your days are done, you're gonna be with Martha again.
The stranger moved towards the door.
If you'll excuse me, George, I have to go now. I have to go home, where there's a big celebration planned.
George watched as the old leather jacket and torn pants turned into a white robe, and a golden light began to fill the room.
You see, George, it's my birthday. Merry Christmas.
Have a wonderful night. All the best to your family, and I'll be back to you real soon.